Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're very excited to bring you the next episode of Bits and Shits. It's a controversial one. It's a big one. It's a popular one. It's Mantic Games. And we called it in the show notes, we called it Redeeming Mantic Games. And the reason for that is because Chaos Dwarfs Online is a place where people freely and frankly exchange their views, and quite a lot of them take a shit on Mantic Games. And Reaver and I have spent a long time browsing the websites of miniature suppliers across the world, and cutting up the things that they sell and turning them into different things. So we thought it would be fun to give you just a clear rundown of everything we think is worth investing in from Mantic Games, because you have to admit their price point is pretty good. So that's going to be Bits and Chits for today. Reaver, what are your early thoughts?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I have some Mantic, but not an overwhelming amount. And certainly, as you mentioned, the price point is great, and I think it often warrants putting up with a little bit in the kit. And you'll be expected to do a little bit of dewarping, hot water bath, even on plastic kits. You're just in for it, and you kind of just have to expect that, and hopefully people who are interested in kit bashing and converting will not be turned away by those types of efforts needed for these kits. But in general, the things I bought, I've been pleased with, and maybe that's being very discriminatory with respect to what I'm buying, but in general, I think I've been happy. Now that said, it does require some filtering, so hopefully what we've got here is a good look, and it's not just from the Abyssal Dwarfs range. So hopefully there's some other things maybe even people on Chaos Dwarfs Online haven't considered.
Yeah, we centered ourselves on the Abyssal Dwarfs range. And, the community owes Mantic Games a salute and a debt of thanks. They're kind of the third-party supplier that carried forward the Chaos Dwarfs concept for many, many years, and also still the most prevalent stockist of those minis in hard plastic, which can be worked with using poly cement, which is important to many miniatures collectors. A lot of people critique the Abyssal Dwarf range, but the truth is it's very broad, and I own most of it, so I can testify to it. And that was one of the big reasons we wanted to do this. But we will both look much further afield because they've released some interesting things recently, and then also equally, I think there are some other Warhammer Square based things that are worth talking about into that mix as well. So with that in mind, we have some kits we wanted to spotlight, and also some kits that we wanted to concede. This is not Mantic propaganda. There are some bad minis sold by this company. Some of them are bad just because they look dumb and we don't like them. But some of them are bad even though they look good on the website. And we're going to be trying to explain some of that to you along the way, because it is possible to buy a Mantic Games product, exactly as Reaver was saying, and have quite an unpleasant time modeling it. So it's quite a long list. So I think we're going to move pretty quickly. Where do you think we should start, Reaver?
So I'd like to start off with a few kits that I think are some of the best that I could find. And I've got four things here, and they all come from a very different very different corner of the web store. So I'll be interested to see what you think of these. I don't think we've talked about all of them explicitly. So let's just go right into it. This one took me a while to find, and it's from the Rift Forged Orcs range, which is in general kind of a dud in my opinion. I think they're like very Warcrafty. I don't know. I struggle to place them in Warhammer Fantasy. But that said, the Stormforged Shrine is something that I could definitely see being converted into an Altar of Hashut. It's got the floating on chains vibe, which you may or may not like, but there's certainly, I think, something to be said about the altar itself, and even the helmed orc. That you could convert that, or replace it with a dwarf of your own. But I think there's something there. I thought it was a weird pick, but I could see myself using it for sure.
I think it's beautiful, and I also think it's like I completely agree with you. I think it almost needs no changes as it is, right? Like the guy is about to beat on an altar with two hammers that he has raised in the air, and his head is sealed inside a tin can, and he's surrounded by evil runes and spikes. There's what more could you ask for? And that thing, your point about Riftforged, I agree. I remember when Riftforged came out, some people were like, "Wow, new Black Orcs," and then it's like, no, it's some other weird thing, and we're not 100% sure what it is. And because it's kind of halfway between two different things, trying to be its own thing, it sort of flopped for a lot of people. But this is the thing. Even if a range concept from Mantic flops, you still have to look at the detail because you could find something like this. I've never seen this before. I think it's really cool.
Alrighty. And the second one is from the Armada range. And this is, in what I've been able to find, one of the sole redeeming parts of the Armada range. That is their Man of War equivalent game. I haven't played that game myself, but I think you actually found these for me when I was struggling to place various different manufacturers of boats into Man of War, scaling and aesthetic wise. These are the Mantic Orc Rabble Squadron. I think these are perfect Hobgoblin Dhow type boat. They're sized reasonably. They are like the smallest class vessel in the Armada range, but they end up coming out pretty mid-size in terms of Man of War scaling. So I think they're totally usable. There's not really something that I've found across other ranges that fits this niche that well. So yeah, I picked them up. I've got a squad of them, and I'll be really looking forward to painting them up.
Yeah, because one of the good things about these is they come in a box of 4, right? I think they're the escort ships of their system, so you're supposed to put them 2 to a base, but who cares about that? Yeah, look, I think you and I kind of almost did this to each other. Like, we talked each other into buying these for exactly that reason. And so I think, I like them. But the reason I like them is because they're quite lo-fi, right? This is a clearly orky-looking, timbery boat. It's got a nice Eastern aesthetic with the sail shape and everything. It's well-sized for Man of War, and it isn't stupid. And I guess the thing that I would say of the entire rest of the Mantic Armada greenskin range is that the ships are kind of like dumb. Like, I know people think, oh, Warhammer, like, it's dumb. You should do dumb, stupid, ridiculous stuff because it's orcs. But it's like, nobody's putting a giant mallet on the front of a ship and actually playing a game with it. These guys, they look serious enough, but Eastern enough to be, just perfect in that hobgoblin role that the designers of Man of War never bothered to fill.
Great. All right, next one. Something we have seen place in golden hats in the past. This is the kind of standard giant. And I think there are plenty of variants of this kit across the store, but I think just the standard giant is what we've seen before. And Jack painted this up, and it turned out fantastic. I think it's a suitable giant miniature. People pull giants from all across different ranges, and I think this one really, it fits the need just as well as any other one, and probably price point's going to be attractive for it. So I don't have too much to say about it. I think it's just decent and fits the role.
I think, again, it's just that joy that we've found with the minis we've been looking at is it's a great start point if you want to do something interesting. It does the job the way that it is. It is slightly different in aesthetic. All the GW giants going back quite a long way have been obese or like had a giant beer gut that's hanging down or whatever. And they have kind of weird misshapen heads. And this is a much simpler aesthetic. It's a busy model. It's got lots of fun textures to it. And that's why I think so many people have turned it into a siege giant or some other variant giant in different ways.
All right, moving on, another siege equipment, but again, from a different range here. So this is the Halfling Iron Beast. I just finished painting this up earlier this year, starting my fledgling halfling cult of Porcodillo. So yeah, it's a fun, mechanical iron and wooden pig, and it's got some halflings on it that, yes, they do have chef's hats and aprons, but I did some pretty quick head swaps, and overall, I think it's a fun mini for the Chaos Halfling enjoyer. It's definitely well on the goofy side, as lots of halfling things tend to be. But in general, I
Yeah.
think it you could do quite a bit with it. It was a bear to assemble, all not a pig. It was a full ass bear, but I got it together. Had to do a little bit of a water bath to straighten things out, but I enjoyed painting it in the end. So
Which bits were bent? The gun,
uh,
the knives.
no, like one ankle was at a full 90-degree, and that is not a skinny ankle. It was like just
Oh,
full. Maybe I have a picture of it kicking around, but it was just like
um,
full soak in like boiling water for like a long time to get that
Mantic,
plastic so it could come back. Leave it in a vice.
Mantic.
I-
And what?
yeah.
What about the? I'm amazed you didn't just trim it, but even then, it would have been work. What about like the the gaps? Were there gaps, or did it all just kind of sit neatly?
There were no gaps in the end, only because I had to shave off like a millimeter off of the perimeter of every keying feature, and
Okay,
then
yeah,
and then
yeah,
the keys fit.
yeah.
But
You
like
went
once
the
I,
other direction.
yeah, yep, exactly. Um, but like other than that, all right, I think it turned out okay, and I don't know, it's fun.
The sad part about that is that this is a very recent kit, right?
Yep.
It's a gorgeous paint job, but like, man, to get your quality control head out of your resin ass, like they call it restic or something. But at the same, look, it's a beautiful model, and I think with enough TLC, it does its incredible job. Like, it's got pots and pans on the side of it. The whole thing's torso is shaped like an ale barrel. The knives are kind of like kitchen knives sticking out the front, and yet it still kind of looks mean and like it could fuck you up. And I think that is exactly what you need to be running halflings in chef hats on a table. Um, yeah, I think it's cute.
Well, that pretty much wraps up the positive things I have for now. Let's go into two that I think are pretty solid milk duds here. Speaking of the milk dud of the Chaos Dwarf Abyssal range, it's the Greater Obsidian Golem. Uh, skipped Rock Leg Day at the gym for sure. He's
Yeah.
just like a McDonald's toy, and I don't really have a kind way of putting that. I think there's plenty of ways you could do a golem that can be like real goofy, and like you might be able to salvage this with a good paint scheme, but I can't.
No, you could it has a good paint scheme. The studio miniature has been painted to a level of a bit, it's got the magma core and all that kind of stuff. You can't paint proportionate legs.
Yeah.
You can't paint like something good where the giant crystals sticking out of his back in a perfect rectangle are.
Yeah, I'm just not a big chibi the thing kind of person. It's just yeah, it doesn't do it. It's like superhero-y.
Be the thing.
Yeah.
Because what I want to do with it is I just want to take its upper body and head, get rid of the crystals coming out the back, and then just like put it on a dreadnought chassis, you know? But instead it's so short. But at the same time, and this is always true, that what is that thing on, like a 40? Like, look at the fists transporting that. Storing it would be a bitch. The skinny legs have done nothing to make it easier to work with because the silhouette of it is so haphazard. God, it would. I tell you what, as well, the damage those arms would take on the average gaming trip, like, yeah, it's a no from me, dog.
Yeah, and I'll add here that so many people on CDO have done fully DIY obsidian golems to an absurdly higher quality than this with like scrap plastic and
Yeah, rock
garbage.
Kadai, the Kadai concept,
Yeah.
right? And it's important for everyone to do their version of Kadai. Every range should have something distinctive, like points for effort. But yeah, it's a miss. It's a solid miss.
All right. And then circling back to what we mentioned on Armada, this is the Abyssal Dwarf Fleet Pack. And just wanted to have this here so we could talk about, our thoughts on, why neither of us have really picked up any Abyssal Dwarf ships, and scaling aside, which is certainly an issue here with the biggest ship eclipsing anything even in the Dreadfleet box, which is a size bigger than all of Man of War. Um, Aside from it just being completely out of scale, even if I were trying to do the thing where I pick up like escorts or other things, there's just nothing here that really I think is very evocative, or really, more importantly, anything that jives with the existing Man of War. Not even in like an Asgore type fleet role. Even the flyers are just like weird, like Sarlacc's flying squig with a howdah. I don't know.
Yeah, one of them is just is like supposed to be a flock of, like, what are they called?
Harpies.
The bird demons. Yeah, harpies, and they reuse a lot of models all the way across the Mantic range, and this is one of them, right? But I think the issue with it is it's not just the things that you've said, because we were so excited when they announced they were doing this, because it was like, sweet, a new take on an old classic. And I spent like a lot of money on Man of War Chaos Dwarf boxes. Not stupid amounts, but just like, I did some eBay sniping to get myself the originals. But the problem with these is that they also don't look like a good execution on the Chaos Dwarf concept. Like, what is there? Like a giant bone skull on the front of one of them. Then they've got guns coming out of like toothy mouths for the mortar boats. And what appears to be like wood paneling in some places. None of those, like, you just wouldn't look at these ships and be like, oh yes, that's what the Chaos Dwarfs ride around in when they're in the ocean. No matter whether it's the Kings of War ones or not. The Kings of War one, they don't have any artillery that's like coming out of the mouth of a giant demon. Yeah, it didn't, I don't know about you, but I took one look at the launch image when they announced these, and I was just immediately like, nope.
Yeah, they're just not convincing ironclads either. Just from like it's a boat that moves around in the water. I just don't even like that, which is pretty base level. I don't know. Yeah, they just they don't do it.
I think they felt the need to make the silhouettes distinctive. The ones that come the closest are the small escorts right at the bottom of the image, if you guys are watching the video. But like, close is not like good enough. I think they felt the need to make distinctive silhouettes, and in so doing, they just made a hard miss. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Well, I guess I'll turn it over to you then to go over some of your best and worst.
So the first and almost most important one for me that I really want everyone in the community to be aware of is a mini called the Abyssal Dwarf Ironcaster. The Ironcaster is a really simple utility piece for a Chaos Dwarf collector, because it is a Demon Smith, a Sorcerer Prophet at a push. It's a classic Chaos Dwarf wizard sculpt for a good price as a foot character, which is, something you're going to have some of, especially for your lower level wizards in whatever game system you're playing. And he's got a cool thematic looking wand, and he's got like some flames in his hand, and he's got a proper curly beard. And there is just nothing breaking the mold about this. This is a realization of the concept. He doesn't have a big towering hat, because you don't need everyone to have a big towering hat. He's got a horned helm. It's got a bull theme. I just kind of look at this one and I think, yeah, people need this. People need this at the price that it's sold at. If they don't want to do something, advanced to get their hands on a Forge World one, or make their own one, or get their hands on a 90s one, you just buy this guy off the street and put him straight into any army of Chaos Dwarfs, in my opinion, that you might want to muster. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, I would absolutely use it. I think, like you said, it fits, could fit like a number of different roles. I really like the scepter, especially. Yeah, any fun little like orb kind of wizard, definitely definitely have a place in my army for sure. And yeah, like
Right.
really no work needed here. It's like you said. So
That's my point. Is I think for the man on the street, and I think he also he reads very clearly. His silhouette very clearly reads. Oh yeah, that's where my wizard is. You know what I mean? He's not just another guy in a hat. And he's got a
Mhm.
perfect. He's got like rings in his beard. He's got kind of a raggedy robe. It's a big cape. I like it.
Yeah.
Up next, comparable is also a foot character. It's one of three arguably takes on this concept in the Abyssal Dwarf range. It's a model called the Abyssal Dwarf Slave Driver. And the Slave Driver is cool because it's a foot character with a sword and a whip. And actually, that is a concept that is not in most Chaos Dwarf armies. You've seen some rules designers shift to the overseer concept, which is something they got from Total War, which is a perfectly reasonable concept. But still, we haven't put whips in the hands of Chaos Dwarfs and had them crack those whips over their slaves. And that is exactly what this model does. And the reason why I picked it over the other two in the range, because there's also one with an advanced metal chain whip, and there's one on a chariot, is because he's wearing this cool bronze slatted armor that has this real Mesopotamian look to it. And I really like that. I really dig the way that once again, it's a manifestation of a Chaos Dwarf who may not be wearing a dome hat, but is nonetheless going to read 100%. You look at this character, you know exactly who he is and what he does, and you don't need to do any conversion work.
Yeah, again, right out of the box on this one, he's got almost like a helm hat hybrid there, which that can fit in a whole lot of different armies. I like that a lot. And the weapon is menacing. I think it's perfect for a slave driver for sure. Like a bone skull carved hilt, very strange blade, but I like it. Yeah, absolutely fit right in with any chaff unit, back rank kind of thing if you wanted.
I think that's the key. That's the key, right? Is that this is just a little character piece. If you want a foot hero, it looks like the kind of guy that would run with your army. Everyone should have one of these, and it's a shame that there aren't more game rules that cover whips and slave driving, but it is what it is. Okay, the third one, I think we might be heading into more controversial territory, but I'm hoping that it will win over the masses. This is a model called the Infernox, and the Infernox is essentially like a demon ogre with a Chaos Dwarf head and a big mechanical suit and backpack, and a kind of one hand is like this burning molten magma hand, and the other is like a snippy grippy techno claw. And I like this guy for a number of reasons, but one of the big reasons I like him is because we see a lot of slave ogre concepts, and we see a lot of people who want to do slave ogre concepts, but they don't tend to be able to deliver things like the ringlet beard on this sculpt. And then also, I think, even if he's not in the role of a slave ogre, when it comes to Kadai, I think this is an interesting direction to take Kadai in, because it blends the magical elements with the industrial elements that I think are often kind of left by the wayside, as something that you only do with the artillery. It's not an aesthetic that everyone, I think, should include in their army, but I do think it's a fun model if you're going in that more kind of construct direction, that a lot of people who want to do like a big mechanical destroyer equivalent would do.
Yeah, I haven't picked this one up myself. I do recall that backpack furnace bit is a really fun piece, even if you didn't end up building the model as is here. I do think you're in for really needing to put in the work on painting to make this one shine, but I think we have plenty of people who that fits their MO. So yeah, I'd absolutely recommend it for sure.
That brings us to a controversial pick. So we're now leaving the Abyssal Dwarf range, but we're not leaving dwarfs altogether. This is a model that I have seen on sale in a number of locations, like for about £6 in the UK. And it is the dwarf with a flamethrower from their dwarf range. I believe he's called a flame priest. And the thing about this one is twofold. Number one, he's one of the only dwarf flamethrower characters we've seen who is dressed like he has a flamethrower, in that this guy is wearing a suit of armor that looks appropriate for the job that he's got. But other than that, I also think his whole aesthetic is entirely compatible with your Chaos Dwarf force. And then he has this wonderful flat head, right? It's not 100% flat as you buy it, but it is almost there. So you only need to do a little bit of snipping, and then you can drop a big hat on top of him, or sculpt one very easily, just the shape of the dome of the hat, and then bang, immediately you've got, you know, your weapons team flamethrower, which I know is something that Warhammer Armies Project guys really want, but then also could just be a fun, cool way of having a champion in your gunline unit. And he's got eye lenses and full set of armor and everything, so he would 100% fit into any Infernal Guard range.
Yeah, and I think that's a fun, underutilized idea. It's just, you know, you don't have to have every single model in a ranged unit wielding the exact same gun. And, you know, especially with filler being encouraged, you know, you could even multi-base him with an additional like crew dude or hobgoblin or somebody. And yeah, I think he'd be perfect for any ranged unit, really. So even if you aren't playing a game with explicit rules for this, I still think it's something worth considering.
Yeah, speaking of which, dishonorable mention goes to the Abyssal Dwarf flamethrower unit. Don't look at it. It's hideous. It's not even on my list of stuff I hate. It's just lame. It's got a big dragon head and pipes, and it's just not very good compared to this. Okay, so let's carry on with things that you need in your Chaos Dwarf army. And one of those things is slave chaff fruit fodder. Now, there are a lot of different people approaching the idea of hobgoblins from a lot of different angles, but I think that the core Mantic Goblins regiment are absolutely fine for this job. I think they might be a little bit shorter than the average hobgoblin, but they have a distinctive look about them. They wear these kind of taller tower helmets, a lot of them. And their weapon aesthetic is not as kind of rudimentary as you're used to seeing with a lot of retail greenskins. So they look like they've been armed and equipped in a more professional force, but then they've got a lot of wood and fabric that means that they don't read as like too heavily armored to really fit in that chaff role. And I just wanted to say, as a kit that goes together in hard plastic, this kit is extremely cheap. If you look for it, especially if you look for it in the ambush starter set, which is basically 2 regiments of these goblins, then you are going to have everything you need to just build your slaves and run them out of the box without having to do, like, you know, shield conversions on a hobgrot, or having to find original hobgoblins or sculpt hats on top of common goblins or whatever. And from that perspective, again, I just think if what you want is to put together a hobgoblin regiment, then these guys will do the job for you very nicely.
Yeah, I like the bucket hat. I like some of the kind of metal masks. There's plenty of looks like fun head options in here. Yeah, I don't think it's my favorite, but you know, if you're coming to Mantic, you're not necessarily all just going for that. So certainly, I'm assuming it comes in a box of 20, so the price point would would absolutely be in favor of these guys. So, and you know, you can always you know, you might need more than one unit. So I like the weapons. I think it all fits. It looks good as a unit. All said, and that's with no mods.
And that brings us to something that actually looks a little bit different, and that is the bolt thrower. Now, the thing about the Mantic bolt thrower is it does look different from any GW bolt thrower. Most importantly, it's actually a double bolt thrower. If you look at it, it's 2 bows with kind of lighter spears that it fires forward. But the reason why this one is on this list is, you know, twofold. Number one, the crew are actually quite good hobgoblins. They look quite different to the normal Mantic goblins. They're an older species of sculpt, but they don't look bad for that job. But the other reason is because this bolt thrower looks much more suitable for your Chaos Dwarf force than the actual common goblin bolt thrower that's now being sold by GW once again, which has an incredibly orky aesthetic to it. It has like teeth on the front of it and, jagged bits of metal that mark it out as being of greenskin manufacture. This bolt thrower, in my opinion, looks much more professionally done in the way that I think hobgoblins would be forced to work if they were asked to assemble light artillery for a Chaos Dwarf army. And from that perspective, I think, once again, straight out of the box, it's not just a bolt thrower that you got from the Greenskins range from GW. It's something that looks different and reads more coherently as being like, this is the lo-fi version of what your Chaos Dwarf army will equip its slaves with.
I think this would fit really well. I love the wheels on it. Looks like you could actually kind of mobilize that around the battlefield, and the crew with the like telescope looking, periscope thing. Holy crap, that's so useful with a bit. That would be so fun in very like all kinds of different war machines. So that's fun.
Yeah, artillery crew from this piece, because they have like a range of different useful things, they also make really good, if you ever need to put greenskins inside a howdah, or, maybe even just put one on the base of one of your other pieces of artillery. Greenskin with a telescope, greenskin pointing, greenskin with a big lever. These are all useful pieces. This model is the Ratkin, which is their version of Skaven. And gosh, let me check what it's called. Because on the web store it has a weird name. Because it's a dual kit, this one. And basically, if you are a Chaos Dwarf fan with an interest in the 80s, then you will have an interest in, threshing machines of all different kinds. And this model is called the Ratkin Death Engine Impaler, or just Death Engine, because you buy the dual kit. Either of the builds of this kit could be useful if you want to make an Iron Demon, or if you want to make any of the classic 80s war machines. So Whirlwind, Tenderizer, but with a kind of a modern aesthetic to it. You get these kind of gas mask rats riding it and a big, horrible, demon-looking rat beast in the middle of it. But you can build around that quite comfortably. First of all, you can just have it be like, this machine is powered by a demon that lives inside it, and that will look absolutely fine. But then secondly, that piece is relatively easy for you to remove in the assembly, so you could actually completely replace it or put a piece of metal over it. There's lots of options. But in either scenario, it's got, the gun version has got something that could easily function as your steam cannonade on the front arc of your Iron Demon. But then alternatively, if you're making a Skullcracker or any form of 80s version, then, 4 reasonable looking buzzsaws that, could be covered in blood or ichor or whatever, but don't look too 40k. They don't look too far beyond the Industrial Revolution, because this is Skaven tier tech, right? But in a slightly neater aesthetic than the GW Skaven would use. So the only thing I think you need to replace is the crewman. And because the crewmen are in these suits, these really great, in my opinion, gas mask rat suits, actually you could just do a simple head swap, whether that's for a green skin head or for a dwarf head, because they're like hunched figures at roughly the right height. In my view, although I've not finished this project yet, it is a relatively low-hanging fruit, even if you have to do a bit of snipping to remove those heads.
Yeah, I like this one. This almost made it into my list. I think all the things you said, absolutely, you could run it with very little conversion, or I think it'd be very easy to box in that demon if you didn't like that. But yeah, I mean, people are always looking for tenderizer kind of proxies, so I think this fits that role pretty well. Honestly, it would fit in great amongst people like me who use the Games Workshop Servo Haulers kit. It almost looks like it's from that, like with the addition of some rats.
Right, exactly. And I think, what a lovely pair of rats they are, right? Sealed in their little environment suits. Something about that really appeals to me. I don't know, maybe it's just because I hate bare heads. I've got like multiple models on this list who've got their whole head and face covered. Okay, so that brings me to item number 8. This one is actually a left field redirect. This is about redeeming their notoriously unpopular Empire of Dust range, which is their Tomb Kings. And I just want to say, if you're building Tomb Kings and you think the Necrolith Colossus in Old World that GW have brought back out onto production looks fucking shit, which I think it does, with its goofy, stupid face and its weird name, the Idol of Shobik is, in my opinion, a much cooler and more thematic way of doing a bone giant sized concept. What it actually is, basically, is a giant Ushabti. But if you think about what we know about like Ramesses II era temple statues and stuff, like it's kind of a bit more suitable in that sense. And it has cool looking weapons. It also looks like it's obviously aged quite badly because it's cracked and damaged, but weathered through time and everything. And from that perspective, you know, I just think it gives much more flavor than the kind of weird, goofy monkey head that you have on top of the bone giant as it's being sold currently.
Yeah, and I think if anything, I would consider taking the kind of back, circular crest off. But I'm assuming that's probably fairly easy. But I like them. I like the model. Anything Anubis related, and I'd sign right up for it. It looks great.
Yeah, I don't have one yet. But the one image that I would direct you to, you know, I think that does suggest to me that removing the back is pretty easy. And, you know, it's the front that faces towards the enemy. So if you're the only one that can see the back surgery that you've done, then that's not the end of the world, is it? So yeah, those were my redemption models, I think, for this range and for this supplier across the board. There's other stuff, you know. I want to recommend the infantry sprues for the Chaos Dwarfs because you can just head swap them if you don't like the heads. But really, that doesn't need saying, right? Like, if you're at the Mantic price point or you want hard plastic models, then you actually don't have very many places to go. But I don't think, you know, people need to hear that from us. What they need to hear from us is which models from Mantic Games suck really hard. And so I'm now going to just do a quick whistle-stop tour of 4 things that I hate. One is from the Abyssal Dwarf range. It's the Abyssal Dwarf Grotesques. I don't know what these are, and I don't know why I want them or need them. They're not Kadai proxies, in my opinion. They're like weird, multi-legged kind of... They look like something that you would shoot in a Doom game. Or maybe kind of weird Slaneshi models. I don't really care. I don't like them. They're not Chaos Dwarfy. They're just misshapen monstrosities from some other range, and they just don't have any thematic connection, so I wouldn't personally use them.
Yeah, irredeemable. There's just nothing there. And yeah, I think that's something that I find a lot with Mantic is like I'll be looking at a thing, especially like any of their demon ranges, and I'm like, this is more alien than it could possibly be, you know, construed as like fantasy or high fantasy even. It's anyway, that's something I find myself like cruising through the store and being like, yeah, just that's the easy pass.
Yeah, I think there's so many things with Mantic where it's just like immediate no. It's not like maybe could I work with this? I don't know. No, it's like, and that's the things on this list. To move on to the next thing, you used to get, I think you still get like 6 of these if you try to buy the Goblin Army. It's the Trolls. Talk about the thing, right? They don't look like trolls. They look like giant dog men. They have exactly the same form of body dysmorphia that your magma or obsidian golem did, right? Look at those legs. They didn't just skip leg day. They got leg transplants from like little girly men. It doesn't look like trolls. It doesn't look like anything else. The proportions are dumb. And like the arms are like twice the size of the head. I don't know who would want these, but people who want to play Warhammer or Warhammer adjacent tabletop wargaming don't want their trolls to look like this.
I can't imagine that these have any kind of fan base. I just, who on earth wants that?
You want to know how I know that's true? I got them in the Goblin Army box, 3 of them, and I put them on eBay, at like 1/3 of the price of buying them from Mantic. They didn't sell for 18 months.
Oh my God. Okay, fair.
Entry three. Empire of Dust, Tomb Kings, Crossbowmen. Sorry, what? Did someone tell you that in ancient Egypt they had crossbows? Nobody thinks that. But really, this is also a cipher for all of the infantry in the Empire of Dust range, because they are wearing the most preposterous all over bronze armor, which is exactly what ancient Egyptians never fucking had. So it doesn't read like they're ancient Egyptians. No matter how many scarabs you put on them, they look like spacemen, right? They look like they're wearing astronaut helmets, a lot of them. And then in particular, like those crossbows, first of all, the crossbows look new, even if they are magical crossbows, which is dumb and weird. Secondly, nobody thinks ancient Egypt when they look at these models because they're armed with crossbows, but nobody thinks ancient Egypt when they look at these models when they're wearing their armor anyway. You do not need these models. Buy a Tomb King starter set. You have no problem.
Yeah, these are Flash Gordon undead if I've ever seen any. Intolerable. I am very picky with Tomb Kings, and these are just so far from it.
I think the thing is they represent both the stupidity of crossbows, but then on a deeper level, all of the Tomb King's infantry look like this. Way too much armor. Armor is in such good condition, and it doesn't look Egyptian. And it's just like, when Mantic were designing Empire of Dust, no risk they were going to get sued by GW for making something that looks like ancient Egyptians. GW did not invent ancient Egyptians. So why did you have to make them look like exactly what you said? Flash Gordon. Does my head in. Meanwhile, among the wet undead, this last unit, so they're wraiths, right? But they're dressed like 18th century French cavalry. They have these tall, long ponytails that are like flowing in the wind. This is like L'Oreal wraiths. You know what I mean? These wraiths put way too much time and energy into their haircuts. And again, it's missing a degree of like, it's too clean. These guys aren't ripped up. They're not tattered. They don't have any of the things that we associate with ghostly undead. You know what I mean? Their robes are in perfect condition. Their scythes are in perfect condition. And that is not just a paint job that's doing that. These things do not have wear and tear on them. And they would reject wear and tear if you tried to model it on. And from that perspective, you know, first of all, they don't read as wraiths to begin with. They just look like skeletons with scythes and dresses on. But secondly, they're just a complete miss for what I would want out of a Vampire Count styled European undead army.
Yeah, I thought they were like dead elves when I didn't blow up the thumbnail. That's pretty brutal. The in the front rank, second from the left, looks like John Cleese, in my opinion. John Cleese the Wraith.
I think it's just impressive that he, you know, managed to get that kind of hair care and hair dye in the afterlife. But I guess they came back to chop cuts. So yeah, look, those were the things that I really wanted to single out because I think they suck. There's so many Mantic models that are kind of in the middle. And I guess from that perspective, Reaver, you've got like a set more stuff that you wanted to talk about. Should we get into those?
Yeah, let's run it down quick. This is the bonus round, Blitz with Chitz. We're going to go through
ding.
Hey, we'll go through several kits that just didn't make the cut, and Chitz can rate them or berate them as he chooses. So we're going to go right in order here. We've got the Vanguard Dwarf Mastiff Packmaster. Have at it.
Okay. So Mantic have an obsession with dogs in their infantry regiments. So there's dogs in the Abyssal Dwarf Infantry Regiment. There's also dogs, the Skaven Cavalry ride dogs, the Goblin Cavalry ride dogs. The Ogres can take Goblins riding dogs. There's too many dogs in Mantic Games. This dwarf looks good. I would get rid of the dog and replace it with a goblin on a chain.
Worth noting, I think you get a different hand that's not filled with creeping rusty meat. But, so if you want to get rid of the dog, I think you get a different hand option. But yeah, I agree. Got a fun weapon on the
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
That's basically all I'll say.
Yes, I've never seen this model before, and I see potential within it.
All right, moving on from there, we have the Halfling Harvester that maybe we've seen used on the forum. Might have to go digging, but what do you think?
So, listen, I remember when this came out, and I know it caused some excitement. The thing that's good about it is the horrific machinery at the front. If you want a whirlwind or a tenderizer, this is much closer to the original concept of a whirlwind or tenderizer. And it's being driven by a giant, bulky orc, which, again, the only thing I think you would truly need to do is replace the halfling with the pitchfork. And the thing that I would replace him with, ironically enough, is an Abyssal Dwarf with a whip, because this orc is having a little bit too much fun to really be allowed in a Chaos Dwarf army. I think he needs to look a little bit more oppressed. But for me personally, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't use it. I don't like this version of the Whirlwind Tenderizer concept, but I can recognize a halfling comedy miniature when I see one.
Yeah, I think that's enough for the lawnmower. I think you covered it. We will move on. This is probably one of the more well-known models, the Abyssal Dwarf Hellfane. For me, at least, the relief texture is not for me, and that looks like way too much work. But I like the concept.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The first thing I wanted to say is, God, it would be so much fucking work. I own this model. I am nowhere near wanting to build and assemble and paint it. I think dry brushing would save you a lot of time, but I also think that there's a lot about this that does not scream Mesopotamia. And from my giant Chaos Dwarf shrine, I would need to feel bulls and Mesopotamia as pretty key visual themes. And the truth is, this model just doesn't deliver that.
All right, moving on to another centerpiece that you don't want in the center of your army. This is the Steel Behemoth from the regular Dwarfs range.
Um, Dwarves and sheep is something that a number of miniatures companies have tried to meme into reality. This is just too clean and neat for me to think of it as a Chaos Dwarf conversion worth making. If you could replace the front with a bull's head or convert it to be more visibly bull horns instead of sheep horns, I might feel differently. Because the crewmen could very easily have big hats attached to the flat tops of their heads. But the only thing you'd then be left dealing with is the classic Order Dwarf faces that are all around the howdah, or whatever we want to call it. And again, I just think it's too much work, man. I can't be bothered with that.
All right, continuing, we've got the Vanguard Warband Booster.
Ding, 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 ding. This one is, hit me. What do you think?
I think I would use probably all three of these. It could have made my list, but I think it's on the fringe. But go ahead.
I hate that these three are sold together, because I just don't understand why you would need a foot hero with a halberd, a fucking giant Kadai, and then a weird magma creature with a see-through plastic base icon above it. Like, look, there's a lot to like about this. I own this, and actually, the foot hero is one of my favorite models that I own, that I have painted. He looks so good with just dry brushing, because he is fully encased in armor and he has a proper big hat. And I think the Charnox behind him is a perfect Kadai. It's the classic magma Kadai, right? So from my perspective, it's a hit. But I'm not as interesting as you, so I don't do like little weird magma spiders and shit. So I don't think I would really have a use for that third part of this kit. But I know that, it's catnip for a guy like you, I would suggest.
Excellent. Yeah, I like the halberd a lot. And yeah, I was about to comment on that guy. Looks very dry brushable, even down to the face. It looks awesome.
Yeah, actually, one last point. I never bothered to straighten out the halberd. And so my guy has a bent halberd that kind of looks like it's bending in the breeze. Shameful.
Classic Mantic. All right. Second to last one, the regular dwarf battle driller.
It's unit filler.
Yeah.
It's not for me. It's not for me. I think I understand why someone else might want to use it as unit filler. His head could easily be flattened and converted with a big hat, but I do not like the Mantic standard issue face that all those Order Dwarfs have, and like all of them have that head. And so it's a skip.
Yep, fair enough. Back
What
rank
do you think?
filler, if anything. I was trying
Yeah,
to see if I could get the flat top response. But yeah, and ultimately, if you're going to be doing that, you might as well just replace the whole head to get rid of the face. But yeah,
that's
like
my problem with that face. It's like the beard does not look like any ethnicity's beard looks. And so it just I see that head everywhere and it haunts my dreams, man. Fucking I see it in the shadows of dark rooms. It's everywhere.
all right, let's close it out on the conversion project that has haunted the forum for quite some time now. The high effort half breeds. What do you think?
Well, I own these, and some of the first models that I was building. My God, this kit is fucking dire. Um, look, they're perfectly competent bull centaurs wearing heavy armor. The heads look stupid. One or two of the heads are okay, the bigger hatty ones, but some of them just you'd want a head swap. And then the most important thing to understand is the gaps on these minis. This is from Mantic's worst era, or so I would have said until you told me that the Big Pig was also a bitch to put together. Like, they're the cheapest cavalry centaurs you're going to need, but Games Workshop has kept cavalry centaurs dead for like 20 years now. So you're free. No, sorry, 30 years. You're free. I release you. You do not need to buy these because only in Warhammer Armies Project can they be used, and the unit is dog shit. So unless you're playing 6th edition like a nerd, it's the second most popular edition on Chaos Dwarfs Online, but never mind. Unless you're playing 6th edition like a nerd, Andy, you don't need Cav Centaurs. Spare yourself. They might look okay, but the kit is just not worth the headache.
Fair enough. All right, rated as only for 6th edition. Andy's got it. But yeah, listen, we've seen them look good. People have done them justice. People put a lot of work in to do that justice. So I will leave it at that, I think.
Yeah. Look, the heavy armor element is a cool element to have for your bull centaurs. But the heads, anyway, yeah. Look, I think we've said a lot. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think we've demonstrated, without bothering to even touch on their 40k equivalent game, that the Mantic range is definitely not as simple as or herder. I think they're ugly, but at least they're cheap. Like, it's not that simple. There are gems in there that can do jobs for you with very little modification and work, but there are also landmines that if you step on them, they'll blow your foot off.
Yep. The landmine's big enough to turn the ankle on an iron beast, that's for sure. Yeah, with that, I think that covers everything we wanted to talk about. Absolutely, if anyone has any other recommendations or has, especially if anybody's painted up any of the models we've talked about or other Mantic models that you would like to see on this list, just link it, cross post it in the Discord thread for this episode, and yeah, hope to have some discussion about it. I think there's plenty to redeem here, and hopefully we've highlighted that. But yeah, tread carefully.
The truth is, at the end of the rainbow with Mantic is like a bunch of models for much cheaper than GW or regular price that fit perfectly into your army project. And it's just worth remembering that for every Mantic model that you look at and decide, yeah, that's not for me, there are still things in the range that are worth browsing the website, worth browsing the bargain bins of your FLGS, because Mantic models are often put on clearance prices. And from that perspective, you could get something even cheaper than their retail price, which compared to what you get if you try to buy from GW or a lot of third-party suppliers, it's just worth it. and you never know what you're going to get. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. This has been Bitz and Chitz. Have a holly jolly weekend, and we will catch you for the next one. Cheerio.
Bye, guys.